Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to do a sea urchin project. So I'm really excited about this. I'm sure you guys have seen it on Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook, these cool little sea urchin type stones. This one is semi-sea urchin-y, and this is the type of stone that we're going to paint on today. So it looks like this. And I use a silicone mold by Happy Dotting Company to create these, and it's just with either plaster Paris or like a casting plaster type thing. So I do have a video about how to make these if you're interested. When I was doing that other video, I used the mold, but I actually set it into a glass, and it ended up doing something really unique to the stone itself. So you can see this one, which I've made recently, is quite smooth and round, whereas this one has a couple little divots in it. So I thought this actually is absolutely perfect for making a little sea urchin, because they're kind of in that same design. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you how to do that, and I've chosen my colors. So I'm going to do just a whole array of different kinds of purple. You can choose different colors if you like. You can choose, purple and green and blue or whatnot. I'd like to do one all the different purples, just because it's kind of that natural sea urchin type of look. And but they come in greens and rose colors and coral and whatever you like to. So you can gather your supplies, whatever paints you're going to use. I'm going to probably use a few different paints and shades of paint. So you can gather those and your tools, and just a variety of a small assortment of tools. And then I'm going to bring you down to the table and we're going to get started. You don't have to do it on a gypsum stone or pre-done stone like this. If you have a nice round rock, you are more than welcome, obviously, to do it on a natural stone. Any round stone like this will do, and we will get started. So we'll see you in a minute. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do, I've got my paintbrush here, I've got my stone, I've got a variety of small tools. I'm just going to have a bunch on hand just so I can see, what's going to be the best fit for me. And they're all quite small because the sea urchins don't really have a lot of big dots on them. I do have one that's about this size, if you can see. That's probably the largest one that I would use in this project. So just a bunch of small ones, and then you're going to be able to gauge just by the space that you have what you're going to want to use. I also have my little geometry set here, which has all my fancy little geometry tools in it. That's what we're going to use to help create our stencil here. And I also have my fabric measuring tape, so we're going to use that as well. So once you've gathered all that, you can choose your darkest of your paint colors or whatever you want to have for your base. I think I'm going to use probably my darkest purple that I have. And I'm just going to paint my whole stone that color and then let that dry and then come back. Okay, so my stone is really dry now. You want to make sure it's super dry, because if you start putting pencil lines on it and it's not quite dry, those pencil lines are going to dig into your paint and you're not going to be able to really get rid of those. So make sure your stone is super dry before you're placing any grid lines on there for your stone. So as you can see, I did a printout here of the sea urchins, which is what we're going to kind of mimic today. And what you can see is they're broken out into sections. So they've got your top dot, which we're going to create here, but then they're also broken up into sections with variety of patterns. So the first thing we want to do is find the center of our stone. For these ones here, the ones that are pre-made, luckily enough, they have a dot that's already created when the stone is created to find the center. If you can't, or if you don't have that, this is when your fabric measuring ruler or tape thingy is going to be super helpful in being able to find where your center is. So go ahead and find your center. Once you found that, we're going to start creating our sections. So typically a real sea urchin has is broken out into 5 sections, and then they might repeat themselves and whatnot. So you can see this one's a pretty clear one where you have 5 sections, and then there's 5 different ones here. So most of the time, naturally, that's what it is. For the sake of simplicity and being able to do this easily, we're just going to do it into 4 main sections instead of trying to measure out the 5. And then once you kind of are comfortable with doing that, you can go for it and try and do your 5. But for today, we're going to start off just keeping it really simple and symmetrical as opposed to asymmetrical there with the 5. So once you found your center, you're going to take your fabric measuring tape, or however you do to create your lines on your stone, and draw your first line. So I'm going to use this because I find it really easy to mark out my line, but if you don't have that, you can use whatever it is that you're using, whether that's a ruler, whatever that looks like for you. You can even use tape if you want to, something like that. That's going to just be able to give you your guidelines for making those really straight lines around a curve, which is not easy to do. So what I realized for the video is that my pencil lines are not going to show up very well on this purple in order for you to be able to see it. So I'm going to just use a piece of chalk just so that you guys are going to be able to see those lines a lot clearer. So what I've done is I've done one way, and now I'm going to do the opposite direction. So there you have it. It's squared off. You can use chalk too. It's a really easy way. It wipes off really easily. You're not having to try and erase pencil lines. So now what I want to do, okay, so now I'm going to take my fabric measuring tape. This is really, really handy to have when you're painting anything that's round, any stones. It's a really, really valuable tool to have. So what I can see here is that I've got 4. I've moved my measuring tape down so that I know when I get to a spot where I have an even amount of space between. So this one I have 4 centimeters here. So I'm marking off here at each centimeter. And I'm going to do that all the way around. So find that space where you Okay, so I've marked all of those off, and now what I want to do is I'm going to do the opposite direction, opposite dots, and create a line. So I know from this dot on this side, I want to line it up with this dot on this side of the section, because that's the opposite one. And I am going to draw a chalk line. And I'm going to do that for each of the ones along here. Okay, and now I'm going to do that for the other section as well. Okay, once you have that, if you are using chalk, like I am today, you can just, once you have your base lines, just take a toothpick with tiny little bit of water. That's all you need. And we can just kind of, because it's a bit messier than pencil for sure. It's not as pretty. So I just want to make sure that my lines are nice and clear. So I'm just taking a little bit of time before painting just to make sure I have really nice clear lines. May not be as pretty when you're starting out, but it certainly is a lot easier at the end when you can just kind of wipe it down without having to try and erase pencil lines. So there we have it. We are ready to start our painting. So what you want to do is try to mark out where you want your sections to be. So you're going to be doing opposite sections are going to be the same. Now I know for me, I want to make sure that, so you want to mark out your section. So I know that I want to have this one, and it'll be this one, and this one, that are going to be my ones that are going to be my large sections. And then just because you want to make sure that you're doing the opposite side, because we are doing the 4. So I know I can see that these ones are evened out and these 4 are going to be the same pattern. And so now we can kind of get started and see where this goes. So you can open up your paint colors now and get those ready. I do have probably 6 or 7 purples here. I'm probably not going to use them all. It just will depend on how we're feeling with this, because honestly I haven't done this pattern, so we're doing this truly together and we're just going to go with the flow and see where it all leads to. Okay, so I have a bunch of my colors here. As you can see, I know that even though I don't know what colors I'm going to put where yet, I do know that I want just the medium to dark colors right now. I've saved some of my lighter colors because those are going to be my next layer and really bring out that pop of color and the 3D effect that sea urchins have. So the first thing I want to do is where I've marked my lines, I know I want to do start with my bigger dots just to get that foundation. So I want to make sure that I'm using my compass tool, and then I'm going from my first dot out to make sure that where I've marked these is the same. Because that's where I want to start with one of my biggest dots. Okay, so I'm going to take my Q-tip and just get rid of the lines that I don't need. Okay, so I'm using my largest one that I have, which is this one here. And I'm going to just pick one of my darker colors, I think, actually, because I want to go with these big ones. I want to have at least 3 layers. So I want to have a dark on these ones and then go to a medium and then also have my light one. So I'm going to pick my darkest that I have out of my shades of color here, and I'm just going to place a dot on that line where I've made my markings. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I want to I'm going to bring this in smaller here, but I'm also going to bring this down with the same size, going down a little bit, and then we will get smaller as we go under that curve. So what I'm going to do is just follow my line. As you can see, I'm starting to get smaller and smaller as I go down that way. And we're going to do the same thing going up in the bigger direction. So I'm still using my same tool. I'm probably going to use a tinier tool as I get closer. So I'm only going to do a couple dots up from that first dot that I created. And then I'm going to use a smaller one, smaller tool. So I'm going to do that for these ones. Okay, so before we get too close into the center, I want to create my center dot. So I actually did go and grab my larger tool because I totally forgot that we were going to do the center as well. So if you have a larger tool, I also have my thumbtack one that I always use. So that's going to be the second layer of my larger dot. So I'm going to take that same color that we had, or that we're using, my darkest out of my assortment of colors, and I'm going to create this center. Okay, so I have my center perfectly round, so you want to make sure that that's super super round, because it is basically the focal point of your stone, so you want to make sure that that's perfectly round. So now you can see we've got a little bit area here left, and so we can fill that in now that you know the distance that you have between those dots and your center. So I'll just bring those all the way up and fill those in. I am doing smaller dots here with a little smaller tool. Okay, so those are our big dots that we've got going here. So now what I want to do is take one of my smaller tools, doesn't really matter which size you want to do, and pick one of your other colors. And now we're going to do the opposite direction. So we're going to do up and down and side to side. I guess if you kept it this way, it's going to be basically your middle sections here, because we just want to work our way in with our main structure before we're starting to fill in the tinier areas. So again, I want to start in that space that we had, that same area. If you want to take your compass and do a circle around so you have that starting point, you can do that as well. You just want to make sure you have your larger ones that are kind of around that curve area, and then you're descending them as you go up and as you're coming down a little bit more. Once you've surpassed this edge here. So now I'm going to make sure that I'm doing it on the opposite side here. Okay, and now I'm going to do, so I've done it on the side to side, I'm going to do up and down as well. In that same color, same tool. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry a little bit because we want to make sure that we're able to handle the stone a little bit more, especially if you're moving it around. You don't want to have dots that are getting flubbed up a little bit. So we're gonna just let that dry. You can use a hair dryer if you want. You can leave it and come back to it, but let's get those all nice and dried up so that we can carry on. I just put a little bit of plastic wrap over top of my paint pots, and just to make sure that they stay nice and fluid while we're waiting for that to dry as well. Okay, so we are back. My dots are all nice and dry. Just gonna take the plastic off of my paints. Okay, so now that these ones are dry, I know for this, because the white lines that are left remaining are the ones that I want to border my section, my larger section. So these are all going to be the same color, but I want them to be small. So I'm just going to use one of my smaller tools in order to make these all, and they're all going to be the same size. These ones we started where it was larger and then descending, but these ones I want to be all relatively the same size, going from the top to the bottom, because they are pretty small. So I think I'm going to pick this fun purple color here. Actually, wrong side. I'm just going to follow my lines all the way down for all of the remaining lines that I have. So as you can see, I did my 8 lines, my 8 tiny lines. I also let it dry, and I just used my Q-tip with just the tiniest bit of dampness on the cotton, and removed my chalk lines just so I can see nicely now where all my lines are. I highly suggest, whenever time and space allows, to let your dots dry as much as you can, just because it's easier to handle. You're going to have less mess ups, that kind of thing. So I often take that time once I've completed a section to go heat up my coffee, take a break, have a snack, something like that, and come back. Also using a hair dryer, I find works really well if time and space doesn't allow for that. So now, as you can see, we're clearly seeing some sections happening here. So we want to make sure that we're keeping those sections, and that's how we're working in it. So when we're doing a pattern, say for this area, we're going to do all 4 at that time before we're moving on to other areas. So as you can see, I'm just going to show you here again this picture with the sea urchins. So for this one, for example, you can see that there are areas that are not coming up to that center spot. So what we do is we're going to work our way inward, and then eventually you're going to see that there's going to be portions that you don't have to get all the way up to the top. They're only going to start decreasing in and creating these beautiful little angles that way. So that's what you're going to start seeing eventually. I think at this point we're going to be working our way in from the ends, or from the sides. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start working in this section that I have this lighter purple. So you can pick whichever one you want for your stone, and but we're going to just work our way in from these 8 smaller base lines. We're going to work our way going inwards to our bigger space. So I'm going to take a tool that's a little bit bigger than the one I was just using. And let's see here. I'm going to pick a color, one of my medium colors. You can choose whichever one you like. Just keep it pretty consistent here. Okay, so again, working in the 4 sections here, and we're going to just go along this line on the inside of those lines that we just made. And again, using a tool that's just a little bit bigger. And this one I want to actually go all the way up to the top. And these ones too are going to stay pretty much the same size. And we're going to do the same thing on this side here. So as you can see, I finished off my lavender here all the way around. I'm going to let this really dry now, because the more that you're handling it when there's wet dots, the more that you're going to kind of find yourself having mess ups. Even for me here, as I was doing that, I had put my thumb here in order to kind of lift my stone up, thinking it was fully dry, and it wasn't. So I did redo my dot on the top here. So I'm going to let everything dry, and then we'll come back and we will carry on. Okay, so we are back, and my stone is completely dry. So now we can carry on. I can touch the whole thing and not worry about messing up any of my dots. So next we're going to take another medium color. So you'll see that it's quite dark right now, but it will lighten up as we do the next layers and start putting some of those lighter shades of color on top of these ones. But what we're doing right now is we're really just wanting to get that base coated. So I'm going to take my next color, which is going to be, let's see here, choose one of the colors that I haven't used yet. So I'm going to use this one. I am going to stick with this same tool that I used for that last set of dots as well. And I'm basically just going to do the exact same thing that I did, but I'm just doing it with a new color here. But as you can see, coming into here, I am going to have to, these ones are going to be descending a little bit, and I think I'm going to actually use a smaller tool as I'm coming into those spaces. Just because I want to make sure that I'm getting a good good spacing in there and not messing that up. So, and this is just going to take me right into that spot here, just like that. And then I'm going to go all the way around here. So I'm going to go back to the other side of my tool, which is a little bit larger. Okay, so there we go. I have now painted in my next lines all the way around. So we are getting closer now into filling in the those 4 sections, those 4 main sections, and then we'll be able to work on the other 4 sections. So again, I'm going to take another color, something that I haven't used yet. And then we're going to carry on doing the exact same thing again with another color. So I actually think maybe I might use this color that I did all my tiny dots with instead before I get into one of my other colors. But I am going to increase my size, so I'm going to use the size that I have just been using, but I'm going to use this fun purple color again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this up just so you can see it a little bit closer here. And again, these ones are going to come all the way up into this center, fill in this space here. So I'm going to take my smaller tool as I get in closer. And now I'm going to go down towards the bottom as well. I'm going to make these a little bit bigger. And I'm going to do that on each side all the way around. Okay, so those layers of dots are done, and I've actually took the hairdryer to it and let it dry. So now I'm going to take the lavender that I used before, and this is going to be my last portion of the this section. So I'm going to, again, I'm just going to take this tool that I have been using, and I'm just going to fill in these spaces, and again take the tinier end, maybe even get in with my toothpick at this point, just to bring those ones up and fill in just this entire space. So as you can see, I've filled in both sides of that. So I'm going to do the same thing for each of these sides, where I'm just going to be filling in these last remaining spaces for these sections. Okay, so there you have it. So we've got those areas are all filled in, and now we're going to start working on the other 4 sections. So I'm going to take a color that I haven't used yet, just so that I can make sure that they're quite distinct from each other. So I'm going to take this fun metallic purpley blue color, and I am going to do basically the exact same thing that we just did. Taking a tool, I think I might actually use a tool that's a little bit bigger, just because I do want this to stand out. So I'm going to find one that's a little bit bigger than what I was using, and I'm going to do basically the exact same thing. I'm going to go now, but we're going to go on the inside of the purple for this section. We're just going to run down all the way, going up and down, and again filling in all the way up to that center dot. To keep your dots consistent in size, you want to really dip and dot each time. When you're getting into wanting to make smaller dots, then you can just dot along and they will get smaller on their own. But if you're wanting to keep them all in that same uniform size, then you're going to want to dip in your paint each and every time. So I'm going to do it again on this side and all the way around, and then I'll be back. Okay, next color is done. Now I'm going to be I want to do another smaller line here. So I'm going to take one of my smaller tools, probably the one that I actually used when I did the 8 final lines of the purple there. I'm going to use that size, and I'm going to use this purple color. I don't think I've used this one quite yet, so just a little bit different. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to pick this up so you can see. I'm just taking my small one and I'm going to do basically like a same row that I did in these other tiny ones. So you can see they're quite a bit smaller than the ones that I just did. So I'm going to do that all the way along on each side, and then we'll be back. Okay, so I've let those ones dry, and now I'm going to move on to my next one. Now we're going to want to start seeing your paints a little bit more tacky, so you're wanting to leave them out a little bit, just because that's what's really going to give you those peaks on your dots that you see, like sea urchins, right? When they're that really 3D effect. That's what you're going to start seeing, or that's what we want to have happen. And you will see that a bit as you add layers, but the only way I know how to describe it is kind of that stickier paint, a little bit thicker than your regular consistency. That's what's really going to give you those nice, beautiful pointed peaks that you want to see for your sea urchin. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did. I'm just going to go back to the dotting tool that I was using for a lot of my dots in the other one, and just pick one of my other colors here and do the same thing along those lines that those tiny lines that I just did. I'm just going to, this one I've got more of like it's more of a sapphire kind of purple. Okay, so here we are. We've done our next layer of dots. So what I'm going to do next is take my next color, which is probably going to be my last one as far as the coating of our dots, and then we're going to get into the second layer of our dots on some of these ones. So I'm going to just again take the same tool that I've been using. It's pretty consistent as far as a good size, and that you can make it a little bit bigger and a bit smaller. Okay, so I'm going to just take my stone and I'm going to just go with my final base color here. And we'll just do the exact same thing that we did in the other one, where we are filling in this final space. As you can see, this one is a tackier paint. I know that it's a thicker paint, and you can see from the side here, if I can, you can just see that it's raised up a little bit more. It's just forming peaks a lot easier than some of the thinner paints. This is what we want to start seeing for our final dots. So if your paint is starting to get a little bit tacky, do not worry, because that's what you want to see for this last little bit. So you're going to want to choose the paints that have that thickness and that tackiness to do your next layers of dots, because that's what we really want to see, is those beautiful hills that are going to create that dimension for your sea urchin. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm just going to fill in all those little spaces, and then we'll be back to do our next layer. Okay, so as you can see, all of the layers all the bottom layer is all finished now. So now comes the fun part of adding a second layer to some of our bigger dots. So this is what we want to do in order to create that 3D effect. So I want to do, on these darker ones, I want to do a medium, and then I'm going to also do a light. So I want to get my second layer done, and then we'll do our third layer as well after that. So I think I'm going to take my bright purple here, This is the one that I used for in the middle of the other sections. And I'm just going to add a dot on top. So I still want to be able to see the bottom color. Which means that when I get to these smaller ones, I'm going to take a smaller tool. And we're going to do that all the way around for those big colors. So whatever medium color you want to do on top of those dark ones, go for it. And then we'll come back and we'll do the next one. Okay, so you can see it's really starting to take shape now. And now I'm going to do the same thing in the middle of the other sections that we did with a different color. So it would be that color, this pink one here. So what you're really going to do is basically go around in some of these bigger ones that we've done. You're just going to add a second layer of a different shade than what you've done before. And then let that dry, and then we'll come back and we'll do our lighter colors. So we'll open up all of our lighter bottles of paint, and then we'll do the top part at the final, because that is a good point for you to be handling your stone, is putting your thumb there. So we don't want to do any more wet paint there until we've got the rest of it all ready to go. So I think I'm going to use, I have this really cool color changing purple that I haven't used yet. So I think I'm going to put that in the center of these next stones. So you're going to want to use a tool that's a little bit smaller than what you used before, just because you want to be able to see the color underneath as you go along. So as you can see, I've done the second layer on those larger ones. I might do another, like a smaller dot on some of the lavender that I have here, because you really want it to pop, right? You really want to have a lot of detail to look at. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick a color here, and I'm going to do smaller dots on those lavender ones, and then we're going to come back here. Okay, so I've done that. As you can see, I've taken that metallic, and I've gone through all of my lavender, my larger lavender ones. And that's all I'm going to do for the mid-tone colors now. So I'm going to cap all of my middle colors, and I'm going to bring out the lighter tone colors. We will do another middle color for in here, but that won't be until the end. So I am going to bottle up my colors now and bring out the light ones, and we'll show you what to do next. Okay, so I've got my 3 lighter colors. I have a lighter lavender color, wisteria, and lilac. And so these are my colors that I'm going to use to create the highlights on my sea urchin. So you can choose however many light colors you like. You can even just go with white, whatever you like. But we are going to get started here on creating those pops of color. So these ones you're going to just use a small tool, because we don't want to cover up the colors that we have below. We want to make sure that we are giving that beautiful light color, but that we can really see all of the work that we've just done. Okay, so I am going to take this light lavender color, and I want to go into one of the darker ones that I have here. So I think I'm going to go on to this sapphire color that I did, and I'm going to do that same thing. I'm just adding tiny little spots of this light color. It's really starting to look sea urchin-y now, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to do that all the way around for that same, on that same color. Okay, so you can see that I've completed that, and I'm just going to do the same thing with some of my other colors here, some of my highlights, and we will definitely do these larger ones, definitely put a larger white on there, but I want to fill in some of the smaller ones first, and then we'll finish off with those big ones. So again, I'm just going to take my small tool here, pick which color I want to put this one on. And we're just going to do the exact same thing. Okay, so those ones are complete. I think I'll do one more set of the light color, and then we're going to work on some of our bigger dots as well. So I think I'm going to put these ones on these bigger dots here. Okay, so I did those ones, and that's pretty much all I'm going to do for the smaller ones. So now I want to work on getting that third layer in for some of my bigger ones. So I'm going to pick, let's see, I might end up even doing 4 on these bigger ones. For now, I'm just going to work on that third layer for those. And I'm going to do that for all 4 of those. Okay, so there we go. So I want to do a third layer on the middle of this other section. So let's see. Really just want to make everything pop, right? So okay, so you can be taking a look at this now, taking a look at yours, deciding what you want. I think I want to add another level on some of these larger ones that I have. So I think I'm going to take this lavender again. Basically anywhere that you think needs a little bit of a pop. That's what you want to just add that other layer on. Okay, so I want to add one more level on that main big dot that we had started out with. So I'm just gonna actually take my toothpick and then I'm gonna choose my lightest color, one that I haven't done on that level yet. So I did the lavender, so I wanna do this white, really light lilac color. And you're going to start seeing now with every level that you add how much more dimension you're getting. Even if you don't have a thicker paint, the more levels that you put on it, the more you're going to see those dimensions. And even really the trick of the eye here with the shading of your colors, like going from dark to light, is also going to give that 3D optimal effect. So there we have it for this. Now what we want to do is fill in this top part a little bit. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to do a medium color, pick one of my medium colors, and I'm going to fill that in and then let that dry and then top it off with one of my lighter colors. So I'm just going to take I have my pencil with my tack at the end, which if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I use quite frequently. And I'm just going to pop that dot right on top. Okay, so I let my second layer dry, and then I added in my third and top and final layer, and so it is all complete. So I hope you had a lot of fun completing this project, as much fun as I did, and I hope you will check out more of the videos. Stay tuned, subscribe, and I'd be happy to do more projects with you. If you have any ideas, if you have any thoughts on what you would like to learn, projects that you'd like to try and aren't really sure how to get started on it, let me know in the comments below or shoot me a message, and I'd be happy to create a tutorial for you. And so I hope you enjoy your little sea urchin, and yeah, we'll see you next time.